Step into the shadows with Paranormal M, where spine-chilling tales are just the beginning. Subscribe now to stay connected to our eerie stories. The next haunting adventure awaits. Unexplained series of events. I wouldn't call myself a medium or anything of that nature, but my whole life I've felt like I've seen things and have been connected to something that just never felt right. I've always had odd paranormal experiences that nobody else has had or seen around me. Both my parents had had unexplainable feelings and premonitions. I don't particularly believe in that and would usually just push it off to everybody just being crazy. I honestly have started to think that I was or am crazy. My mom used to see things that would come true, but not like see the future type, but see things that would have significance to events yet to come. For an example, one night after moving into her house, she had several dreams of snakes. Visions of snakes everywhere. And she mentioned it to me, but I thought she was just crazy. Nights later, her fiancé at the time got up to use the bathroom, stepped on something squishy. He flipped the lights on to discover a snake. They called animal control only to discover an infestation of snakes in the attic. My mom was very artistic and would draw things, and always talked about visions of apples, and would always tell me, "Don't bite the apple." She would reference Snow White biting the apple and going into a deep sleep. Even biting the apple, etc. Eve biting the apple, etc. Close to her passing, she made this reference a lot, and oddly enough, my mom was hospitalized and went into a coma where she passed away a month after being in said coma. Freaked me out, honestly, and I'm sure you're probably thinking that it was just chance that she died the same way she kept mentioning. That's what I thought too. My great-grandmother was in the hospital close to her death. Said that my great-grandfather had been visiting her. He passed away years prior. She said that he was coming to get her. Days later, she passed. My father fell to his knees one day, and he said that he felt in his chest that something was wrong with her cousin. Shortly after, he got a phone call saying that he had been killed in a car accident. To give a few references of these unexplained events that have happened to me, I'm going to drop a few stories, and honestly would like to see what anyone thinks. Is it all in my head? Or could there be a slight chance that maybe I'm not crazy? When I was a toddler, probably 3 or so, my mom and I were driving in as we were passing a wreck on the road. A semi had crushed a car, and the vehicle was destroyed as it was under the semi. The vehicle was so bad you couldn't tell the make or model barely. As we passed by, I started shouting at my mom that it was my aunt. My body knew, and I kept saying it over and over. My mom reassured me that it wasn't, as you couldn't see the person trapped under nor tell the make of the vehicle. We arrived at my grandmother's house, where we received a call saying that my aunt had been in a wreck and had went under the semi. The woman trapped under was in fact her. When I was around 10 or 11, I went to visit a friend's family with them on a family trip to upstate New York. They lived down a back street, but all close by each other in what felt like a family compound. The first few days felt completely fine, but there was one night where we all gathered outside. I believe they were having a bonfire outside, and we all started telling ghost stories. I was 11 or so, and of course their goal was to try and scare me, which ultimately didn't work, and as the night progressed, I started hearing things in the surrounding woods, and then noticed a figure in the upstairs window looking down on everyone. I pointed it out, and when everybody came to look, as you would, nobody was there. Thought it may have been a cruel prank until I realized that every person was accounted for outside. For what felt like eternity, I kept thinking about that figure in the back of my head as my thoughts raced through it. I saw the figure once again, made a slight comment about it before my computer had a weird glitch, and at this point, the family seemed annoyed that I kept bringing up something that wasn't there. Later on in the night, my friend who I traveled with pulled me to the side and let me know that she did in fact see something as well, but was afraid nobody would believe her, as they didn't believe me. We left the next day, but the eerie feeling remained. Now, I'm sure I know what you're thinking. Scary stories plus a child's active imagination equals seeing things that aren't real. However, just indulge me and keep reading. On February 14th, 2014, I was in middle school. It was Valentine's Day, and it was Friday, right before the weekend. That morning, my teacher handed out a word scramble for fun, where you make as many words with the letters from the words you're given, like the game Anagrams. The words were Happy Valentine's Day. The first word I came up with was death followed by die. I kept circling back to those words, and they repeated in my head over and over. The school day ended, and I was walking home, and my house was surrounded by ambulances. My grandfather walked to the bus stop and said something had happened, and we would talk about it later. To keep the story short, my stepfather had died in his sleep from conjunctive heart failure. I moved from that house to live with another family member after his death. When I turned 14, my great-aunt's boyfriend at the time had a heart attack and died. They'd been together for a long time, but he never married her. He was often cold toward everyone in the family, and although they were together for a long time, he refused to marry her. Several years prior to that was the last time I'd spoken to them, as my family were not close, and I mentioned the fact that they weren't married and asked why that was. And to be fair, children have no filter and say whatever they think in that moment. In that moment, I could feel the mood change, and the tension could be cut with a knife, and his energy felt sinister, like his spirit was just evil, almost as if he was surrounded by darkness. I hadn't spoken to them since that moment until I found out he had passed away. My family consoled my great-aunt, and we all helped her pack the house up to get ready to move in with us. She could no longer stay in the house. We finished packing up her house within 2 days, and toward the end, my aunt pulled me aside and let me know how thankful she was that I was there, but told me that when her boyfriend was having his heart attack, he pulled her, and he had this sinister tone. He told her, "If something happens to me, don't let your great-nephew into this house." Hearing that only caused me to have an kind of off feeling while we were finishing up. Days after, she moved into her home, and I was sleeping when I felt like sleep paralysis started to kick in. I laid in my bed feeling helpless. That's when I saw a figure creep over me, screaming at me. And I will never forget the words it said. "Get out!" It screamed at me, shaking me, and I laid still. It then raised its hand at me and struck me in the face. I sat up quickly out of my state of sleep, and in shock and in fear. I was thinking I just had the worst nightmare. My face was burning from what I thought was just a dream, but when I touched it, I noticed it was wet. I rushed to the bathroom, noticing that there was now a gash on my face and blood was dripping down. I never said anything because at the time my other family member that I lived with was having schizophrenic hallucinations. And not only that, severe PTSD from being in the military. She had said that she would see shadow figures, and always assumed she was just having another episode. I didn't want to trigger another episode, so I created a rational explanation and kept it to myself. Not long after that, I moved, and the house we moved into was nice. It was big enough for all of us and felt like a good fit. During the showing of the house, the basement door had a lock on it. We were unable to view it at the time. We were assured that it was nothing, and we moved in, and we just had the lock cut, and to our disbelief, there was a letter and a pentagram painted in black on the wall. The letter stated that the previous tenant was involved in some sketch activities like witchcraft. She said that she had went too far, opened something that she couldn't close, thus the move. Nobody had thought of anything of it, really, as we all had no belief in anything like that. I'd suppressed those previous experiences as I rationalized them to just being an overly active imagination. Time went by. We had painted the wall, but the pentagram kept seeping through every time we painted, so we left it alone. There were often times where we would hear things through the night, such as creaking in cabinets and closing, like footsteps running through the house. But we were at a pretty big house, so we always rationalized it. At night, I could hear kids giggle and footsteps running through the hallway. Cabinets started slamming oftentimes, and pictures would just fall off the wall spontaneously. It got so bad that we ended up calling a priest, asked him to bless the house. We didn't mention the pentagram, and when he walked in, he walked straight down the stairs as if he were drawn to it. He blessed the house, and we didn't have anything bad happen for a while. I was around 16 at the time when everybody decided to take a weekend family getaway. But unfortunately, I had to work that weekend as my job only allowed me to work weekends due to school. So I had to stay home. I came home one day and had a cold, eerie feeling walking into the house. It was like I was a victim of a home invasion when I was younger. So since then, I have always been extremely paranoid and on edge. We had several dogs and we lived pretty secluded with neighbors close enough if something happened, but far enough if we wanted privacy. So I wasn't quite anxious as I would normally be. But that eerie feeling never left. I decided to call it a night and my dog followed me to bed. I was laying there tossing and turning, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. That's when I noticed that one corner of my room looked extremely dark, darker than normal. The bedroom window normally casted a shadow in that corner, but this time it was pitch black, like I couldn't see through it. In the same moment that I noticed it, my dog peered her head up and faced the corner as well. She started growling, and I tried to shush her, assuming it was nothing except she started growling louder and louder. The hair on her body stuck up and she was snarling. It looked like she had an extreme case of rabies. I'd never saw her like that, growling and barking and foaming at the mouth at the edge of my bed. Kept trying to calm her down when she lunged at the corner barking as if she saw an intruder. I quickly turned the lights on and the shadow in the room was just filled with light. She shortly calmed down. I convinced myself that it was nothing, tried to go back to sleep. Laid back down only to awake to the sound of her growling as she was before in the corner of the room. I decided to grab my pillow, head to my car to sleep. As I looked back to my bedroom window, it was completely black and my stomach dropped from the feeling I couldn't explain. Never stayed in that house alone again. Haven't had anything like that happen for a while as I live in an apartment with other people now. But every now and then, I feel like I'm being watched. I have nightmares sometimes, sit up in the middle of the night in darkness with unexplained fear. And honestly, I feel like I'm a pretty normal person with some unexplained things that have happened that I just keep suppressing. Do you think this is all in my head? Find myself trying to still rationalize everything and nobody to turn to. Who really can believe me? Or just wouldn't think I needed to be locked up in an asylum. My husband and I both heard a scream in our house at 3 a.m. My daughter was not and does not sleep alone on the couch at night. She sleeps in her own bed, own room, comfortable and happy. While I appreciate the concern, my daughter's sleeping arrangements aren't the point of this post. She fell asleep on the couch with us while we were watching TV, so we let her sleep while we finished the show. I went upstairs to head to bed while my husband was downstairs, 2 rooms over in the kitchen, filling his water bottle, and was going to grab her to bring her upstairs to her room right after. Just as the title states, my husband and I stayed up pretty late the other night, just binging a show. We finally decided to head to bed. I went upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and turned the fan on, then laid my head down while he headed to the kitchen to fill up his water bottle. The second I laid down, I heard what I can only describe as a demonic something out of a horror movie scream. It's coming from downstairs. I was frozen in fear for a moment, then decided to text my husband and ask if he heard it too. He immediately texted me at the same time to confirm he had heard it, and as soon as he did, he bolted to the living room to check on our 2-year-old daughter as she was sleeping on the couch. We found her passed out, mouth open and snoring, so we know it couldn't have come from her. Tripping all over myself here. Not that she could have made that kind of sound to begin with, we were just trying to make sense of it. But it did come from our living room. I feel actually insane explaining it because it felt like something that only happens in horror movies. Never experienced this before. And we live in the city, and it was negative 35 degrees Celsius. So, we had all of our windows shut. Sound didn't come from outside. We ruled out any animal noises as we don't have a ton of foxes in the area, let alone in the city. Our home is 114 years old, and right across the back alley from a funeral home was a selling point for us. When we first moved in, our neighbors and a few others had stated the house was haunted. But in the past 2 years we've lived here, we've never experienced anything that terrifying. The odd shadow figure in our peripherals, sounds that could be chalked up to our cats. Sleep paralysis has frequented me more often. But as for paranormal activity, I wouldn't confirm our house is necessarily haunted. Hasn't happened since. We're both extremely confused and slightly terrified. I did smudge our home heavily the next morning. Windows open and let out the stagnant energy. Anybody have any ideas on what it possibly could have been? If not a terrifying paranormal event. Something bothering me when I tried to sleep throughout my life. The first time I ever had a paranormal experience was back when I was incredibly young. My sister and I share a mom, and on this particular night, my sister went to her dad's house to spend the night. I asked my mom to set up this full adult-sized camouflage tent in the playroom. It was because I wanted to play camping in it. I don't think it was an actual camping tent because the fabric was super lightweight and poor, but it was easy to set up and full-sized, so I liked to play in it often, especially when my sister was gone, and I had nobody to play with. I set up my sleeping bag in the tent and all my toys, like a plastic baby swing I had for my dolls, and a few other toys for my dolls like bottles. I set all my things along the walls of the tent. I don't exactly remember going to bed, but I do remember waking up to a very loud sound of someone brushing up against the tent while walking outside of it, like walking around in the playroom. I opened my eyes and I looked to the wall. I looked to the wall I was hearing it from, and no joke, the baby swing I had in there was swinging full force. I was so young that I had no idea what to make of it. I literally got up, looked around the tent, and saw no one, and then went to my mom's room and slept with her the rest of the night. I never mentioned it because I was so young I didn't understand it. I just brushed it off. When we moved into a new house, I was 4 or 5 years old. 5 was the first number marked on the wall for my height, so give or take around that age. My older sister was having a sleepover with 2 of her friends. And being the little sibling who's annoying, I begged to join, and eventually they gave in and let me. Nothing interesting happened until the morning. That's when I woke up on the couch, realized that everybody else was still asleep, and I knew they'd be mad if I turned on the TV or something and woke them up. So I decided to go back to bed. Maybe 30 seconds after I closed my eyes, the blanket that I was using was almost whipped off of me. I remember feeling the air of the blanket when it was coming down, like you shake a blanket and it creates an airflow. It was the craziest experience ever, and I do remember being very scared and confused, but again, I was so young, didn't fully understand what was happening. Cut to today. I'm now almost 21. I still live in the same house the blanket incident occurred in. Since then, a few things have happened. A normal person would probably find them weird and kind of uncomfortable to live with, but I've learned that as long as I don't acknowledge it, at some point it goes away. About 2 weeks ago, maybe around 11 p.m. or 12 a.m., I was just about to fully fall asleep. That's when my mattress was partially yanked off of my bed frame. My bed is set up in the corner of my room, and I have a very small room, meaning I have to move my trash can. My lamp and my nightstand actually move my bed comfortably off the bed frame, to change the sheets and stuff. When I looked at my lamp, the nightstand, and trash can, everything was seriously crooked and smushed together like I had tried to, take the bed off the frame without moving them. My bed was at least a good 8 or 10 inches away from the wall. I think I was so scared that my body didn't let me process it. I was naked and half awake in my own bed home alone. I didn't know what to do besides fix everything and go back to bed until the next morning. I started to verbally demand it out of my house and off my property. Told it that it's not allowed here. I'm starting to think that something does seriously visit me on occasion, but it only happens when I'm resting or about to go to sleep. It doesn't happen very often, but it has happened enough to where I'm making this post to share my experience and to see if anybody else has experienced something like this before. An entity or energy bothering you while you sleep. I just found this thread and I'm curious to know if anybody else has dealt with this. And did it ever stop? And how did you make it stop? Yes, no, and it didn't. Accidentally answered 3 knocks. Hello. A couple of months after I moved into my house around 2 years ago, I was showering pretty late at night. There's a window in the shower with frosting on it. I heard 3 knocks on my window, which I assumed was my boyfriend messing with me, and I knocked back the same way. I was tempted to open the window, but didn't. I asked him after, "How much are you able to see in from the outside?" He didn't understand, so I asked if that was him knocking, and it was not. And I know it wasn't him because we were both in tears, freaking out. Never heard of the superstition of 3 knocks until a couple of months after. That's when I came across someone talking about it online and saying to never answer and don't knock back. That's when I got concerned. It's kind of funny because at the point I kept telling my boyfriend I was cursed because of this bad luck I was having. Not only me, but my loved ones too. Maybe it's a coincidence. I hear things fall sometimes, and maybe that's a coincidence too. I've always been a skeptic, but lately I've been kind of convinced. It started with me feeling like somebody was right above me when I was asleep. Not quite sleep paralysis, but I opened my eyes and no one was there. But it felt like someone was hovering right above me. I'd be face to face with them, and when I opened my eyes, there'd be nothing. And this happened before I found out about the 3 knocks potentially letting spirits in. This hasn't happened for a while, but the past few weeks between 2 or 3 a.m. every night I hear creaks throughout the house, in a way that feels like someone's moving from place to place. I'll even feel footsteps or sense footsteps around me, like someone's coming toward my room. It's so convincing that I sometimes think it's my boyfriend coming to my room, and I'll look and no one's coming. I feel like I just hear strange things. It makes it hard to sleep until like 3 a.m. or so. A shower with frosting on it. That was a bad food joke of mine. Something has moved in. I'm residing in my childhood home after many, many years. The home is very cluttered and disorganized. When I was a kid, I would go outside and meet another girl who seemed to always hang around in my yard. We'd play games and talk and pick flowers and investigate down the ditch behind the house. I never found her odd, but her name was kind of odd. Jane. She always dressed the same, and I asked if she had other clothes. She would say yes, but they were all the same. People who saw us believed I had an imaginary friend. It's because I'd be talking to somebody, but there was no one actually there. I recently began hearing a whispering noise in some parts of the house. If I was away for a day, things would have been moved. My pillows would be in another room. The trash can's sideways and doors are shut and lights won't work, but eventually do work. Brushed it off as me having done it. 2 nights ago I was in bed, almost asleep, when I felt something get on the bed. I looked down and both cats were on the bed. The weight of being on the bed was noticeable because the covers were dented as if somebody sat on them. This morning, my boy cat randomly acted like a guardian. I laid back down from my nap and he got on the bed very close to me. As I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a clicking noise, then a whisper, "You don't remember me?" and immediately recognized Jane. But I hadn't thought of her in years. She told me she wishes that we could play together again. I was super freaked out and didn't know what to say. She repeated her statement only louder. From the next bedroom, I heard this massive snoring sound and somebody rolling around in that bed. I very carefully get up and peered into that room, and it's clear somebody's in the bed. I try to ignore all of this, brushing it off as a dream. I went down to have breakfast and curl up on the sofa with a book. And something came down and sat on the other end of the couch, and again Jane was whispering. She said, "My family's here now to live with you." Something weird came down the stairs. It sat in the recliner. The leather squeaked. I was getting more and more freaked out. I started pinching myself to see if I was dreaming. I wasn't dreaming. Jane whispered that her brother will be home tonight. I spent the day occupying myself with tasks, trying not to think about what's happening to remain skeptical. About 6:30 p.m., there was a knock at the front door. I went to open it and Jane was right behind me, incredibly excited, saying, He's here. I heard what sounded like a wheelchair coming up the sidewalk. There was a weird shimmer in the air. Jane said that he had very sick, but he would be home with us now. None of them materialized. I just felt like I was trying to look at them and my eyes couldn't stay focused or sort of would slide away. I calmed myself down. I started asking questions. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you want? Those sorts of things. I didn't hear a reply, and at this point I'm absolutely shaking in fear. I hear a sound that reminded me of my mom's dead husband when he used a walker. I bolted upstairs, shut my door, lit candles, and tried to reason out what was going on. Was this a fever or something more worrisome? I slowly got more and more tired and went to sleep. When I woke up in the morning, the family was surrounding my bed, and Mom's husband was very tall, very close to me. I could them clearly, like normal people except the eyes. They were all white with no pupil. I grabbed my phone, called my friend who's into a lot of esoteric stuff. She came over for a sleepover after I explained everything. She was using sage and asking questions and trying to convince the spirits to leave. The glass of water on my nightstand shattered. No one was touching it. Books were swept off their shelves and flew around. Dishes in the sink started breaking. I decided to get the hell out of that house and bring my friend with me to a hotel for a couple of days. I go home, and it's silent. Just normal. Somebody had tidied the house. I was still scared, but I really needed to work the next morning in my home office. Calmed down, had a couple glasses of wine, went to bed. Closed my bedroom door, pulled the shades. I was feeling secure, and there was no strange noises or anything, just a normal house. In the middle of the night, I don't know the time, but it sounded like my home office was being trashed. I ran to check the books were all over, paper crumpled, my planner ripped apart, tears on my seat. The only thing that wasn't touched was my work laptop. Nothing happened for a long time after that, and when it did occur, I heard Jane apologize. Said that she isn't really Jane, but her ghost, and the ghost family. I'm so exhausted. I just asked why they were here, and the voice of my mother's dead husband answered that they wanted to take care of the house and me, to help me remember my mom and siblings. That morning I sat up in bed and was nose to nose with a demonic face. It was red and smelled like smoke. It screamed at me. Called a friend and she brought a few of her witchy friends. Tried to clear the house but couldn't. Couldn't afford to move, so I had to stay. Went quiet for a year, and now the whispering has started, and I don't know what to do. Scary experience at Waterfall Walking Trail. A few weeks ago, my partner and I decided to go for a late drive to this really pretty walking trail on a mountain. It's about 2 hours away from my house. I've only been here a handful of times, but it's somewhere my partner and his family would visit often. We left home at around midnight, which is a lot later than we normally would. So it was like 2:30 in the morning, at least when we actually got to the trail. I had a weird feeling as soon as I got out of the car, but I get that every time I'm in a bushy area, so I brushed it off. This walking trail twists you through the bush and a dirt path, down a bunch of stairs to a cave with glowworms. What's a glowworm? And over a waterfall that eventually loops back around at the end. I stopped at a sign just before you walk into the bush to light a J. I heard what sounded like someone walking in the bush off the trail. Again, I just brushed it off to being a big lizard or something. However, that eerie feeling was way more intense now. Every few steps down the trail, I was turning around to look behind me. It sounded like someone was walking behind us in boots. Anyway, we get to a point in the trail where you can start to see the waterfall. You have to start walking down the stairs. They also kind of bend a little as you go around the corner. My partner stops in front of me, and as I'm turning around to check behind me, I hear a female voice say, "Stop." Clear as day. It was right in my ear. It was not really a threatening voice, but it sent a cold shiver through my whole body, and I knew something didn't want us there. Before I could say anything, my partner turns around and says that we should leave. I agree, and we basically run out of this trail, both of us now checking behind us. As we exited the trail, still running, my partner turns to check behind us one more time and stumbles into me, nearly tripping both of us over in the process. We've never pulled out of there so quick. When we finally felt safe further down the mountain, I told my partner that I heard and asked him if he had heard it too, and that's why he wanted to leave. He said he didn't hear the voice, but he could tell from the sound of the waterfall that the river below was really high up, probably blocked our path. He did say as he was leaving he heard some weird clicking noises, and that's why he fell into me. I also heard those noises, but at the point I really didn't want to look behind me and just wanted to get the fuck out of there. After talking to my partner more about it, he told me a few people have died in that river from jumping off the waterfall. Oddly enough, when I heard the first noise, I was reading a sign warning people not to jump from the waterfall to the river, and that there was a fine if you were caught swimming in the river. So yeah, that's my story. It was a really weird experience, and haven't been back to that mountain since. I thought they were going to say there's a fine if you kill yourself. Oh, I'll edit that out. My grand's house. I'll get the first incident out of the way. Probably happened first to my knowledge. My granddad died roughly 10 months before I was born. My cousin is the youngest in the family to have met him. She claims that when she was staying at my grand's house one night after he had died, she woke up and he was standing at the end of the bed watching her. I say, get it out of the way, because that's literally all I know, and frankly, my cousin is a prick, and, well, she lies. So who knows? Anyway, moving on. The remaining events occurred in a different room to the one my cousin claims to have had an experience in. This room was the smallest bedroom, and I hated this room. For as long as I can recall, I hated how it made me feel, and I used to always say that it was haunted. Even before I had any experience, couldn't quite explain it. One of the weird feelings came from behind the door where there was a narrow recess into the wall. It was maybe 15 inches across, and my gran used to store loose ends and knots and flip that around, like rolls of wrapping paper and such. But for some reason I always felt like something was watching me out of that little gap in the wall. One time, when I was probably 5 years old, I was staying the night at my grand's. I had to sleep in that room. Despite every effort to make the room friendly by putting up Barney wallpaper for the non-UK or perhaps younger UK readers, this wasn't Barney the dinosaur, but a cartoon from the late 80s and 90s about an old English sheepdog. I still hated the room. I got told it was time for bed, so I made my way up the stairs to the top. Turned to the right into a short landing. I had to come back on myself and get to the room at the end. But as I turned, I froze. On the white wooden door in front of me, I could see a face with the horns looking back at me. The only way I can describe it was that it was almost like seeing it in my mind's eye rather than a physical mark. But I would swear to you it was right in front of me, looking at me from the door. Now, it could well have been the product of a child's vivid imagination, but it sufficiently freaked me out enough to make me cry with fear and panic. Ran back downstairs to get an adult and said that there was a face on the door. When we was brought back upstairs, it was gone. The third incident happened when I was about 13. My gran was the only one in the family who had Sky TV, so I would regularly go and just visit so that I could watch wrestling on the TV. On this particular day, I was downstairs watching and my gran was upstairs. Usually she was sewing when she was upstairs, and she had one of those old Singer treadle sewing machines. A big cast iron unit with a solid wooden frame. And for further context, my gran was easily 4'9", a tiny woman with her healthiest years behind her for sure. Anyway, I was downstairs watching The Rock do his thing. Heard a terrific bang from upstairs. Rushed upstairs to check my gran, that she was okay, and when I saw her come out of her bedroom, the sewing machine, which easily weighed upwards of 30 pounds, was on the floor, having tipped itself over. Lastly, some years later, I was speaking to my aunt. She had spent a lot of her childhood in the 70s and 60s growing up in that house. She said that room had been her bedroom. She told me that she also hated the room and thought it to be haunted, and that she'd had an experience of her own. The bedroom sat at the front side of the house and had one window, which was directly above the front door. She recalled that one day she was out in the street playing with friends while her siblings and parents were at work. She is the youngest of 4. And something made her look up at the house, and in the window she could see the figure of a man standing looking out into the street, despite knowing for sure that there was no one home. So that's the story of my grand's house. Unfortunately, we have no ties to the house anymore. She moved out at around 2010 and died in 2012. But I still regularly think about the house and the weird feeling I got in that bathroom throughout my childhood. And the only one in that bedroom, not the rest of the house. What is what I'm experiencing called? I've always had a very detailed, realistic dream and night terror since childhood. Usually they're pretty random and cool after the fears wear off, and have inspired a lot of my art, honestly. Anyways, I'd had this dream when I was 18, about this guy in a void staring at me. He had this quartz crystal necklace on, I remember that catching my eye first, and I asked him if I could have it. He gave it to me. It was so random I thought nothing of it. It's kind of a dick move. So a couple of months later, I got to this program for trade school, and I'm outside of my dorm, and I see this man that looks exactly like the person in my dream. He's wearing a quartz necklace. It freaked me the fuck out, especially because when I looked at him, he turned and stared at me. It was like immediate recognition. He called me over, and we immediately clicked, at least as friends. It was as if I already knew him. It was so freaking weird because he went, "We've met before in another life." Like, "Fella, I don't even know you, that's so weird." Gave me the necklace too. I told him a few months later that we all lived at this trade school and it takes a long time to complete the program about the dream. And he 100% believed me and thought it was so strange but also really cool. Around 2 years later, my best friend and I lived in a house with other friends and stuff. My friend has a younger brother who's not exactly the fan favorite among us. He has a lot of mental health problems that cause him to lash out, but when he's calm, he's a real joy to be around. There'd be times when I'd be outside in the backyard smoking and painting, and I'd see a black dot in my head. I'd feel his presence. I'd ask my friend, "Did you invite your brother over?" She said, "No, why?" I told her because he's here. And she was very confused. Then the doorbell rang. I didn't hear him say anything or anything like that, and it happened multiple times. Even if I was in my room just doing my own thing, listening to music, I'd just know he was there. It was like this very heavy feeling and kind of a sense of fear, I guess. My family member went missing for over a decade, and nobody heard a word from them. We all assumed that they were dead. Recently, I started thinking a lot about them, like intensely. We weren't close at all, and they were very odd, honestly. But I asked another family member if they'd heard from them recently or not. They said no. We don't think they're dead. That week, that family member showed up in town. Could totally be a weird coincidence, but after not even thinking about them for years to suddenly thinking intensely about someone for them showing up is super weird. No, I'm not schizophrenic, and no, I don't have any desire to be a witch or something like that. I don't mess with tarot cards or Ouija boards. My family is seriously Christian, like old values. Men can't have long hair or unshaven faces, and dancing and music's forbidden type of Christian. They don't even believe in ghosts. My friends have seen the weird stuff happen, or me knowing something before it happens, so they believe me and think it's cool and weird, but I don't know what it's called. The other half of my family believes in all the stuff my Christian half doesn't, and they say that we come from spiritual people. Is it possible for spirits to communicate through broken, inactive scales? I have a very old scale that's been around in our house for years. At some point, though, it stopped working. It would read very weirdly when stepped on. We assumed it was the ex-roommate that broke it, so it sat on the floor in the bathroom and was never used. We didn't really bother to put it up and had no space to store it, so we kept it in there for a month or so. Then whenever I'd shower or just be in the bathroom, it would start showing numbers without anything on it or around it. I'd be across the bathroom and it would start reading the numbers negative 1.0, 0.5, 1.0, and 1.2.0. Kept happening only at night, never in the day. Eventually, I'd start joking around and would prompt it to answer dumb questions like which shirt I should choose for bed or if something was using it to show a number. I typically prompted with questions for yes to be like 1.0, no to be 0.5. Every time I asked a question, only those numbers would show. If I accidentally asked an open-ended question or simply wasn't talking at all, 2.0 or negative 1.0 used to show. but now it only shows 1 or 0.5. Other appliances would also act kind of off, like my washer turning off mid-cycle for no reason. Don't get me started. The dishwasher turning off or the TV turned on 3 times in one night before until I told the ghost to stop because I had a phone call. For some reason, that stopped it from turning off and on again. Though there's a chance that maybe that was just my neighbors who had a similar remote to me. The scale, though, that's what has me convinced it's something else in the house. Beyond always feeling watched when walking in the hall at night, it'll answer any question I pose with those 2 numbers. And usually, answers remain the same when I try to word questions differently, just to test it. My ex-roommate and father both said it was probably just because it was on the floor, and maybe me walking in the bathroom was messing with something. Maybe it was causing it to read things randomly. I'm 100 pounds, so I thought maybe. We got a new scale, but that one ended up broken too. So I put the original scale on top of it, so it was no longer on the floor. It was quiet for a long while. I think maybe a few months. I only saw the scale change numbers a couple of times, but tonight at like 2:30 a.m. when I was getting out of the shower, I started chatting like I usually did with it, and it just kept replying to every question I asked. It wouldn't change when I stopped talking, only if I asked things. This was roughly our conversation. I should also add for context to the first question, I had fake blood in the room as well. I was planning a weird core video for my portfolio. I was going to dress up like that spirit from The Grudge and hide in the shower and was prepping to film it for the weekend. 0.0 is the normal starting range that it shows when the scale has no more weight or changes to it. 1.0 for yes, 0.5 for no. Do you mind if I film a video for my portfolio? I'm going to be dressed as a ghost, but I don't know if that's offensive to spirits or not. 1.0. Changed to normal 0.0 directly after. Got it. Just gonna dress as an intruder. I get you. It's 2:48 a.m. You're not often really active so late. Is there any reason you're up? 0.5 to 0.0. Does the scale take any energy to talk through? 0.5 to 0.0. If I go to college next year and I take the scale with me, will you be able to talk through it still? 0.5 to 0.0. Are you only able to talk through it in the house? 1.0 to 0.0. Damn. Okay, I'm going to be back every other weekend and holidays. Would you be able to talk to me whenever I return? 1.0 to 0.0. Good, I'm going to try to find other methods for us to talk. I can find some kind of a device so we don't have to talk through numbers. Would you want that? 1.0 to 0.0. Well, find something for us to talk through when the house is empty. Struggling to wrap my hair in a towel because I still can't do the towel trick. Don't judge me for asking styling questions. Helps me test that it actually is responding, and also, not gonna lie, it's got good styling opinions when I ask about clothes. You think I should cut my hair? I got it to grow out healthy, but it's so long it's ridiculous. 0.5 to 0.0. You'd think I should put it up instead? 1.0 to 0.0. I kinda was a traitor and still haven't put it up. Alright, thanks, I gotta head to bed now. The last thing I said was bye, and the scale went back to 0.0 and stayed on that. Writing this as well, I can feel a weird, really cold spot in the air next to me even though the heater's on. But is it reasonable to suspect potentially something talking to me through it? It responds well, the scale isn't on the floor, and no matter what I Google, I haven't found any reason as to why it would do this while inactive, with no one on it. Or why it goes up and down so specifically. Or I randomly feel chills and appliances turn on and off. Are there any chances that the scale would do this on its own reasonably, or why a spirit would even choose a scale to begin with if it is a spirit? If it is one, it seems friendly, and I really feel bad about it possibly being stuck in this house. I'd feel bad about it being stuck in a scale. dream I just had might have been inflicted by a demon. I don't know. X. X just feels right for some reason. Something like that was their name. Dream 1. Tried to tempt my character, bringing people in my life that would force me to do things I didn't want to do. And when I resisted, they made the challenges harder based off of my strongest desires, tried to punish me by threatening to take away the things I care about the most. Starting with threatening to take away my career, then proceeding to take away my friends. 3 a.m., I wake up at 3 a.m., I get some water, fall back asleep. Dream 2, I start the dream by waking up in my bed as I would a normal day. But when I wake up, there are 3 golden coins and 3 silver daggers underneath the skin of my hands. I try to tell my roommate and close friend Josh about it, even showing him the coins and daggers. But he's weirdly out of character, unimpressed, and seems like he's pulling a prank on me to lead me astray. Then I wake up from that dream to another, 3rd dream. Dream 3. I'm now at some history lecture with Josh. Neither of us actually have any classes together. I try to ask this professor about the coin and dagger dream I just had, and he plays it off as I'm being delusional. Second person to do that now. But he mentions saying something along the lines of, "It's not as if Q, or some name that has a fashion like the other ones up top, isn't real." Then when I return to my seat in the lecture, I get a call from one of my closest friends ever, and another roommate of mine, Michael, and I start telling him about what just happened. But as he starts to speak, his speech turns into undiscernible sounds of horror and agony. Sounds like a threat of some type. Then I wake up. Real world. When I wake up in the real world, the same world I'm typing this dream journal on my phone in. I have my phone, it's up to my ear, being held by my hand in the same way I had it in my dream. In a cold sweat and very hard to breathe. I don't know if this is important to the story, but the sun still hadn't risen. But yet there are birds chirping outside very loudly. I don't know if birds normally are up this early, around 5:40 a.m., Virginia, Appalachia. Yes, they are. Additional knowledge to know. I don't want to make note, or I do want to make note that this is not the first dream or experience of the supernatural type I've ever had. I've had ones where I've experienced the entire day yet to come before it even happens. Even seen places I've never seen before, down to the most perfect minute detail. I've had dreams where it felt like I've seen almost entire worlds or the past. Even different realities, somewhat similar to what just happened this previous night. Seeing my family and friends gaslighting me not to worry about it, and then proceeding to see them die or suffer when I do worry about it. But this was the most vivid dream of this type I've ever had. I felt the coins and daggers under my skin. I felt the cold of the snow and the ice. And that isn't even currently outside. The environment in the first dream, whenever I was outside. And in the 3rd dream, when I picked up that phone, I felt the heart being squeezed and tight. While all this may sound like some made-up bullshit, I promise you it's not. I'm genuinely scared of what this means and if I should actually be concerned. Nonetheless, I have to type this out in case the memory of the dream fades away and makes it easier to share. The only thing that makes me question you is your lack of knowledge of birds chirping in the morning. I don't know where you are in the world, or I guess let me rephrase that. No matter where you are in the world, there will be birds chirping in the morning before the sun comes up. Or if you're unfortunate, roosters. Who have told others in their dreams that they know that they're dreaming? What happens next? Last night I had a dream so strange and scary and mostly disturbing that it's still lingering in my mind. It wasn't just an ordinary dream, it was one of those that leave a strong feeling behind, even after waking up. What made it different was the moment I somehow realized I was dreaming. Normally, this realization would excite me. But this time, instead of simply enjoying the experience, I felt an overwhelming urge to tell everyone around me that I knew it was a dream. As soon as I spoke those words, something changed. The atmosphere shifted in an unsettling way, and suddenly, eerie images started appearing around me. They were outright terrifying, but significantly their randomness and the way they emerged made them deeply disturbing. It was as if the dream itself didn't want me to be aware that it was a dream, and by acknowledging it, I'd triggered something sinister. One image that truly haunted me was of a figure with a head shaped like a clock. At first, it seemed like a strange and harmless concept, but in that dreamlike state, it was incredibly unsettling. The ticking sound coming from its head grew louder and more intense, blending with an overwhelming sense of dread. It wasn't just the sight of the figure that disturbed me, it was the feeling it carried, an unexplainable heaviness that filled the entire space. No matter where I turned, the dream seemed to react to my awareness, warping itself into something darker. The people around me who had seemed normal before started behaving oddly, some staring blankly, others whispering things I couldn't quite understand. It felt as if I had broken some unspoken rule of the dream world, and now was facing the consequences. The air itself felt thicker, making it harder to move, as if the dream was trying to trap me inside so I can see all this creepy scene. And look at the guy with his head shaped like a clock that's ticking non-stop. Then, just as the eerie feeling reached its peak, I woke up. But even after opening my eyes, the strangeness hadn't fully left me. Without realizing it, I found out that I was pulling the skin under my eyes to wake myself up, almost as if I was trying to shake off whatever had lingered from the dream while I was already sleeping. It was such an unnatural reaction that like a sleeping person can do without being conscious. Something I'd never done before, which made the whole experience even more unsettling. Even now, hours later, I can't shake the feeling that something in that dream was trying to reach me. The clock-headed figure, the eerie whispers, the thick air, it all felt deliberate, as if the dream wanted to show me something I wasn't ready to understand. Something about that dream was different. I've had strange dreams before, but this one carried a weight, a sense that it wasn't just a meaningless figment of my imagination. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks, but a collection of subconscious fears manifesting in strange ways, or maybe, just maybe, dreams aren't always as random as we think. Shadow people at my friend's house. I was talking with my girlfriend about ghost stories and encounters. It made me think of my experience and really felt like sharing, as I haven't thought of this memory in ages. To preface, I'm generally not a skeptic individual, nor have I had any firm beliefs in any certain religion. While I do believe in life beyond and something higher, I can't firmly say I just, subscribe to any ideology. To set the scene, I was in 6th grade, fresh into middle school and very much an awkward, chubby kid. Needless to say, I didn't have very many friends except for a few. This story includes one of them that I will refer to as Jay. Me and Jay got along well. He didn't have very many friends, same as me. We mostly bonded over shared interests, such as Skyrim. It was still a relatively new game, and we were both obsessed. His mom would drive to school, or rather drive me to school. I would usually spend time at his house in the mornings as well as some evenings. Though I didn't sleep over except a few times, mostly due to Jay's dad not being the nicest individual. Not abusive, just mean and the stereotype of a dad who didn't like his job. So he came home grumpy and in a bad mood a good bit. Anyways, the first time I slept over, me and Jay were sitting in his living room. His house was a little bit smaller, but had a cozy vibe. Next to the living room was a hallway that had doors on each side, maybe 10 or 15 feet long. Anyways, Jay mentioned to me that his house was a little haunted, and at first I thought he was trying to just scare me. Though he was sincere, he was not one to lie to get a reaction. Was and is not in his temperament to do so. In addition to this, I have experienced my own interesting events at my stepfather's house that already set the belief of ghosts in my mind. He mentioned that occasionally you would see ghost figures come from the hallway and appear at the corner of your eye, that when you looked directly, they would not be there. He took it with a grain of salt and just continued to play on his copy of Skyrim and other games in his Xbox 360 along with him. Later into the evening, I can't recall what time specifically, but I believe around 10 or a little after what he described, so out of the corner of my eye, I would occasionally catch silhouettes of these shadow-like figures, some taller, some shorter, no real defining features. I found it odd, as when I mentioned it to him, he just seemed like, "Yeah, I told you," in kind of a more calm, matter-of-fact tone. Though I had witnessed these shadow figures, I strangely didn't feel afraid that I was at any risk. To be honest, it felt more like observers with no real intent to directly interact or frighten us. Kind of like a person just checking in with the mindset of, "What are you guys up to?" Again, didn't feel threatened, and honestly was just more fascinated than anything. The shadow occurrences were not entirely frequent, but happened enough for me to understand it wasn't a one-off thing created by shadows from the light of the TV. Even though the light did set an ambiance and lit up the living room, these figures had enough of a distinct shape and movement where I don't believe my eyes were playing tricks on me. I was able to sleep all right and didn't lose my real shut-eye from the knowledge of what I'd seen. I suppose regularly sleeping in a house in the woods in an old Catawba Indian land helped fortify my resilience to such matters. A mysterious dream stalks my family for generations. No one talks about it. For as long as I can remember, there's been something strange in my family, something we don't really talk about. It's a recurring dream passed down from decades, and only certain people experience it. The pattern is always the same. In the beginning, you see a shadowy male figure wearing a cap in your dreams. At first, he doesn't do anything, just lurks in the background watching. As the days go by, he gets closer and more noticeable. Then one night, he finally makes his move. He chases you, and he catches you. He chokes you. You suffocate in your sleep, unable to wake up unless someone physically wakes you. Weirdest part, this only happens to people who've never heard of it before. If you know about it, you're safe. But if you don't, you're at risk. My brother was the most recent one to experience it. He had no idea about the dream, but when he described what happened to him, my family immediately recognized it. The last person before him to have the dream was my cousin. And something really weird happened that night I was there. I was in another room doing homework when I needed to grab something from my cousin's room. She'd already gone to bed, so I quietly stepped in. As I was leaving, I saw something in my peripheral vision. A shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed. When I turned to look directly at it, there was nothing there. At the time, I brushed it off as my eyes playing tricks on me. But just a few minutes later, she started screaming in her sleep. My older cousin and I ran in and shook her awake. I was too young to understand what was happening. But now I know she was having that dream. My family once did a puja, a ritual. It was in a temple to stop this. Worked for a while, but now it's happening again. They've been talking about doing another one, but for it to work, every single family member needs to be there. And that's been difficult to arrange. I don't know if they'll ever actually go through with it. And here's the thing. I don't usually believe in this kind of stuff, but I come from a mountainous region where spiritual forces, curses, and the power of the gods are taken very seriously. You don't disrespect them. And as much as I shouldn't want to, I can't help but be curious. Kind of want to experience the dream myself. But since I already know about it, I might never get the chance. So now I'm wondering, has anybody else ever experienced something like this? A shadowy man lurking in your dreams, waiting and then choking you in your sleep. Or is this just something tied to my family alone? Well, if your theory is correct, if you've now told everybody about it, hopefully nobody will experience it. See ya.